Okay, so in this quick video, well, I will see if it's quick or not. I'm going to record myself making a IK leg and as well as an IK foot complete setup. So we're going to go ahead and open a scene which I created that just has joints and geometry. Uh, and we're not going to worry about skinning or anything like that because the goal of the video is to really focus on how the IK handles and the constraints with relation to the pivot groups that we're going to create for down here. We're just going to try to demystify that whole process. And so let's get started. The basics here are we're going to have this set up where we have an upper leg. I'm just going to call this upper leg. And we're going to have a knee joint. And we're going to have an ankle. And we're going to have a ball and toe. Okay, so those are going to be our joints. Now we need to have our IK handles, so I'm going to create one from the upper leg to the ankle. And I'm just going to make sure that our solver type is right, and it is not. We want the solver type to be a rotate plane, so I'm going to change that. And just to verify, if I select the IK handle and we lift, we can see that it does have the rotate plane. Let's go ahead and x-ray our geometry so I can see through. Okay, and next up we're going to create two more IK handles. So I'm going to grab my control for the IK handle control. Now I'm going to double click it because I want to make sure that I get it right on the creation. And yes, so a single chain is what we want. So we're going to do one from the ankle to the ball. And then another one from the ball to the toe tip, or toe joint. So let's quickly rename these. I'm going to call this the ankle because it's threaded from the upper leg to the ankle. I'm going to call this the ball, okay, and I'm going to call this the toe. Okay. So and these should definitely be different. They should be single chain, and then see my attributes are exposed here, and I can see, and then when I switch to the ankle, it's rotate plane. Okay. So that's done now. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to create a controller for the foot. This is going to be a NURB circle. What I'm going to do is I'm going to snap it, hold down V to snap. I'm going to snap it right to the joint at the tip of the toe. There we go. Close that for more space. And I'm going to push it down a little bit so that it acts sort of like the floor, like it should be the floor level and not like in the middle of the foot. I'm going to right click and go to control vertex, and I'm going to go to show and turn off everything except NURBS curves. So control vertex, oh, I need NURBS CVs as well. Okay, so I'm going to, just with the memory of what I had as far as I could show polygons as well, just so you could see. I was going to try to do it by memory, but I'm just basically making like a snowshoe for this guy. And I'm going to use this snowshoe and we're going to use the object here as the main controller for everything we do with the foot. So that's good. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to freeze out the transformation and delete the history. And I'm going to call this my foot control. Okay. All right, great. So go ahead and also center the pivot. Okay. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my IK handles, all three of them, and let's show everything again. Middle mouse, drag it right into the foot control. So now when we lift up the foot control and rotate it, all of our IK handles are following us. And that's an important step. Make sure you have the controller with no history and no values in the translate and rotate, so that you can always come back to 0 and your leg will return to its proper spot. I'm going to go ahead and create one more NURBS controller here. I'm going to create a circle. This time I'm going to rotate it in Z or X 90 degrees. And I'm going to hold down V and put move tool on and snap it to the knee. There we go. And I'm just going to pull it out a little bit. This is going to be how we get the knee to follow and stay in sort of front of the rest of the character, prevent the flipping. So this is going to be our pole vector controller. We'll just call it knee control. And afterwards, I'm going to make the. I'm just going to, for the video, just forget the left side, right side. All right, you understand that you'll need to do that if you're going to do both sides, but for this tutorial, I'm not worried about it. So modify freeze transformations, and then I'm going to go ahead and grab my ankle. I'm going to just grab it here and shift select the knee control and go to constrain pole vector. Okay, get the order right. First the knee controller and then the ankle. There we go. And then when you're done, you should have that line. So the last thing we want to do here is we want to delete the history. So Alt Shift D deletes history. So that now we have a knee controller that corrects when our foot rotates up. And let's say we want to just keep the knee moving properly, so that pole vector allows animators to set the knee anywhere they want, because it kind of is going to aim right at that controller. So, and I typically will parent this knee controller directly under the foot controller. Mostly just because you want it to stay with you. So now it sort of goes with the foot, and when you translate it, rotate it too. Okay. Alright, so the next step is we need a way for animators to get in and animate all the different rotations of this foot. And we do that using pivot groups, which are the groups are going to be nicely nested into a hierarchy over here that we're going to create And we're not going to do any constraining. These are just going to be literally placed in a certain systematic way so that when you rotate, mostly in X, because that's kind of like if you look down and you watch your foot, you can rotate around in Y from the ankle. I'm not going to be able to because the IK handle is set up, but you can, rotate a lot in that direction just from the ankle. But most of your animation type motions are done in X. So we're going to set up some attributes, some custom attributes here that allow you to animate in different ways this 3-bone setup here for the foot. Okay, so first thing we need to do is take these two IK handles and group them. And we're going to call this the toe tap group. Okay, and that is a pivot group, which means we want to change the pivot point of the group, and we're going to center it right at the ball of the foot here. So I'm going to snap it to the ball of the foot, and so that now if I click off and then back on D, so I'm on the group, and now if I rotate it in X, I can tap the foot. You can see it's happening here. Okay, so that's going to be our first setup. Now we're going to grab the ankle IK and group that into itself by itself so that we have a way to animate that ankle separately. And I'm going to call this first I'm going to snap the pivot also to the ball joint, so exactly where it was on that last grouping. So D, V, snap to the ball joint, and you can see that we have just group 1, so we need to correct that. So I'm going to hit D, and I'm going to call this the heel peel group. Okay, so we have a toe tap group, and we've got the heel peel group. And now we're going to shift select these two and group them together. So we got to take the toe tap, take the heel peel, and hit Control G to group them. And I'll expand it so you can see what's going on. And we're going to call this one the swivel group. Okay, and I'm actually going to call this. So we're going to move the pivot point of the swivel group also to the ball joint. Oops. So grab the group itself, make sure it's just the group, press D, and then snap that to the ball. Okay, so that is going to make the animator let them control the swivel of the leg on the ball of the foot. So if I hit D again, and I rotate, in X, see that that's kind of like swiveling it there. And whereas the heel peel is just lifting from the ankle. So that you may have thought, oh, well, that's just kind of like going to do the same thing because it's connected at the same spot. But if you look at the hierarchy, you can see that this swivel group is the parent of heel peel. So when I rotate from X, it's actually rotating both those groups in X. And you get a different motion as opposed to just doing heel peel where the ball of the foot stays planted. And toe tap is the opposite direction. Okay, so we have let's just make sure that, okay, so we have the 3 group set up. Okay, and now we're going to group the swivel joint to itself. So we're creating the system here, right? So now we have a new group, and we're going to call this one the toe tip. Toe tip. So the tippy toe group. And if you can imagine where we're going to need to have the pivot point to tip the toe, we're going to need it at the tip of the toe. So if I hold down V, snap it to the tip of the toe, and actually we're going to, this is a step I forget to do a lot. We're going to not just leave it there at the tip of the toe, but we actually, to get realistic animation for this particular motion, you need to have it actually flush against the ground plane. So you saw what I did. I just moved the pivot point down, so it's right kind of like under the geometry. So if I hit D and then I try to rotate, you can see now it's going to actually lift from a little bit lower point, so that if you've got the skinned mesh, it'll influence the vertices around the base here of the foot. So this is the toe tip pivot, and let's bring our outliner back up. And you could call these pivot or group. And so the last thing we do is group the toe tip pivot to itself, and then we expand everything, and I'm going to call or move the pivot point here straight up to the ankle joint. So D, V, snap it to the ankle, and hit D again, and we're going to call this one the ankle group. So and that will just sort of wrap things up for the grouping. When you have the ankle group selected, you can see you can actually extend the foot straight down. Okay, so when you're done with your pivot group setup and your hierarchy is identical to what I have here, now we're ready to go ahead and wire these things up so that we can form these actions not directly on these group nodes, because nobody would like that. So we're going to make sure that everything is at zeros in the pivot groups, because we are going to be actually animating on these group nodes. It's just we're going to do it from a separate place, which I'll show you here in a second. Okay, so the first step is we need to go to our modify and add attribute. Okay, but we're going to add attributes to our foot control. So modify, add attribute with the controller selected. That's going to bring up this panel. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to stick with float values, and we're going to grab a minimum of 0 and a maximum of 60, and we're going to plug in the names of these pivot groups. So we got the ankle is our first one, add, and it's annoyingly mine doesn't save these numeric properties. You have to do it each time, but you can see as we write these in, call this toe tip, they're going to populate over here in the channel box. And we'll call this swivel, also 60 and 0, and this is going to be toe tap. I see I typoed that one. Let's fix that when we're done here. And we're going to call the next one heel peel. So now these aren't connected to any of these. All we're doing is making these empty input fields here that are going to be, we can drive the values all the way up to 60 as the max and down back to 0. So we're going to, okay, let me quickly fix this so it's named correctly. Okay, and close that out. And if we grab this, you can see that we have now all these extra below visibility. These are all new channels that we've added. And if I middle mouse, drag, I should be able to go all the way up to 60 and it'll lock. Okay, so again, clicking on the name of the channel and will give you the ability to start middle mouse dragging to add values or to increase the float value. I'm going to go in and lock and hide the scale and visibility because I no longer need animators to see this. So right click, lock and hide. Okay, so we need to open up another menu to wire these values up. There's a couple ways to do it, but I'm going to use the connection editor here. And now this is important. Okay, so in this view here, you want to make sure that you load your output. This is the output. This is going to be our controller. And if yours looks much more dense than mine, you probably have show non-keyable checked, which may look like that. So uncheck that and you'll see just the values that match the ones that are available here in the UI. Okay, so what we want is these output values to line up with inputs that are the group nodes that we created. Okay, and basically all we're going to do is click on the one here. I'm going to click on the one here that it is corresponding to. I'm going to load that in, and I'm going to grab the rotate X. For all of these, it's going to be rotate X except swivel, which is Y because we're going to rotate our foot around the ball at that point. So here we go. So let's just go down the list. And we got toe tip. And we're going to call this, we're going to load this in. And we're going to rotate X on the toe tip. We're going to load in the swivel. We're going to rotate the Y. And you can see these updating here. I'm going to do toe tap. I'm going to load that here and rotate on the X. But I want to make sure make sure you select the value on the foot control first or it will rewire it. I'm going to load the heel peel, pick heel peel, and that also is X. Alright, so if I can close that and click on the foot control, now you'll see some animation happening. So that's the kind of the final outcome that we want is, okay, so you're lifting your heel off the ground here, you're tapping your toe, and you can see actually that one I'm going to have to change the direction. So let's fix that in a second. Let's test the others. Swivel is also so okay, so this is a good teachable moment. I need to go both positive and negative in my float operation that is tied to these attributes. The good news is we can fix that without having to start over. Okay, so we can go positive all the way up to 60, and that gives us a nice range for the for the swivel here, but we can't go in at all. So that's because we set it at a 0 and then only positive float value, not negative. So probably wouldn't need a negative value for that one because, yeah, tipping the toe, well, we're not going to be able to do it now that once it has an incoming connection, you can't rotate it on that, along that axis anymore manually. I can do it this way, but not this way. Okay, so let's go into check the last one here, which was the ankle. And so we're able to sort of tip the ankle down, but not up as well. So let's fix that really quickly. So I'm going to grab, make sure the object's still selected. I'm going to just make sure everything's at 0. Going to modify edit attribute. Okay. So we can change the minimum maximum here for all of these. So the ankle, let's do -60, and the heel peel, let's just go in. I think I'm doing -60 on all of them, but the toe tip, like if I go back to toe tip, yeah, we can just close that. Toe tap, it doesn't need to go positive at all. So let's do 0 for toe tap for the positive. Okay, so let's close that. And now let's connect some geometry here. And how I'm going to do that is, since these are all separate meshes, I am just going to do straightforward parenting here. So let's see what happens. I'm going to expand my meshes group, and I don't have these named, but that's okay. But I do want to center the pivot here of each. Okay, so G, 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 just centering the pivot. For that one, I'm going to actually send the pivot to the top of the mesh. And same with this one. Modify center pivot, and then just so that yeah, well, you'll see. Okay. All right, so just grab and drop them into the joint, appropriate joint. So that's going to be the toe. And then this is going to be the ball. This is going to follow with the ankle. And this as well. Okay, and then this should go under the knee. And then the last one, yeah, let's just do that on the upper leg, and we'll leave that top one loose. So okay, so let's try to animate this really simply. Okay, so if I pull it up, we get a knee bend. If we just rotate the foot in IK, we can, rotate and translate and pull vector straighten. Okay, and we can get close here. Actually, let's make it so we can see just the geometry here. Alright, so going to tap my toe, peel my heel off the ground and swivel my foot and get on my tiptoes. That's nice. Although you would probably, to be precise, have to so because I don't have a bone here, and this is not actually skinning, it's not skinned, I could probably fix that with moving the geometry pivot point. But you get the principle there, okay? And then the ankle, you can bend right at the ankle independently there, okay? So if we grab them all, we can get some crazy funky broken foot action. But yeah, that's a very straightforward. You can add more controls, but this should give you the ability to animate your basics, your walks, your idles, and this is doing an IK setup. There's other setups that you could do, and then there's also just straightforward FK bone controls that some people prefer. But just figured that you guys should know this technique. Okay, that's all there is. I'm gonna actually go in and make a screenshot here of our outliner, and I will post this in Canvas.